So my first question is, well, I always start soft. So can you tell me about yourself? Like, tell me about your background. Like, where are you from? Your parents and childhood upbringing.
Well, I'm from originally born in Cincinnati, but moved to Cleveland at an infancy age. This Cleveland is indeed my home. I attended grade school, high school, John Hay, and at Kent State University. I've lived in the Cleveland area probably, well, the Cleveland area. After I married, then I moved to Cleveland Heights and then to Shaker, where I've lived the last 35 years. So I am a Clevelander. I like to
Okay.
say born and raised.
All right. Now, what about your parents? Like, what
Well,
do
my
they do for a
parents are
living?
both deceased. They were both deceased. They were from Kentucky, Middlesboro, Kentucky, and then we migrated up to Cleveland. Mhm.
Okay. So I'm kind of curious about your involvement with the cultural gardens. So I know Leo Jackson is the one, well, credited for coming up with the idea. Like, I'm curious, how did the idea come off the ground?
Well, you mean my initial involvement? I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
riding along, minding my own business. The wife and I, one Sunday afternoon, and we decided to cut through the Martin Luther King area to get to the lake shore to go to the west side. And we came upon this large group of people that were walking by. And after they passed, I asked one of the participants, I said, "What's going on there?" They said, "Oh, it's One World Day." I said, "One World Day? What's that?" They said, "Well, that's when all the gardens that we have down here get together in a big block party." I said, "There's a lot of gardens?" They said, "Yes, there's at least 12." I said, "Was there an African garden?" Being curious. They said, "Oh, yeah, it's just right down there." So my wife and I hopped back in the car to ride right down there, and we drove into the lake almost, and I still didn't see it. I turned around and came back to the original spot and started all over again after three tries, mind you, trying to find this African garden. I stopped. There was a sister sitting over by the pole. So I asked this sister, I said, "Tell me, where's the African garden, sister?" She said, "Right here, brother." I said, "Right here? Like, where?" I was looking around for something. I saw geraniums and impatiens growing in a little plot and a pole. And I looked up, there was a flag, the African flag. I said, "This is it?" She said, "This is it." I said, "Oh, no, we've got to do better than this." So she said, "Well, come on and join us." She should never have said that. I attended their first meeting, and from the first meeting, I was hooked, line and sinker. And that was probably 13 years ago that I took the bite and of that forbidden apple, I like to say, because it was a total commitment. I have been probably the president of the organization the last, I saw 11 years. And that's how I became involved with the cultural gardens, and in particular, the African American cultural gardens.
Okay, so you said 13 years ago. So this is actually, so the structure that's on top of the hill, that's actually pretty new.
Yes, so we got raised the money for that finally. In 2015, was started in 2016, so it's brand new. The doorway of no return, the beginning.
Oh, okay, so that's interesting because I know when the cultural gardens opened, it was like, celebrated, but originally it was just a flag and I guess some flowers.
1977.
Yeah,
That's all.
1977.
It's probably less than that because the idea was born. Well, not the idea was born in 77, but it took all those years prior to that to get it to that point. A lot of ups and downs. And finally, in August of 1977, it was dedicated with a lot of fanfare. Representatives from several African countries were there. Um, there was a grand march from I think it was Morning Star Church to that particular site that they dedicated. Yeah, so it's been a long journey. The dream, first of all, with Leo Jackson and the thought of a Negro garden. We were Negroes in those days. Mhm.
Okay, that's like now, even though you weren't around, but so I'm kind of curious about the the cultural Cleveland Cultural Federation. Originally, they said that the quote unquote Negro Gardens was more suited for the American gardens, but it seemed like there was nothing there originally that acknowledged African American history.
Well, there were some ups and downs because it was the the concept was first born and voted upon by the Federation, and it was soundly defeated. You know, they didn't want a Negro garden at that time. Um, the city also voted it down in its initial concept. But and I think a lot of the thought school of thought at that time was, why have a Negro garden? We were Americans, and we should be about the American thing, that we didn't have an identity of all of our own. So that was the thing. And then it took persons such as Booker Tall, who initially started the whole thing rolling, the professor there at Tri-C, who wanted to have an African garden. So the journey began with Booker Tall, Cordell Edge, and a lot of other leaders after that.
Hey, um, sorry. Oh yeah. So, do you know how Booker T. Tall came on the Federation board? He's like the first black member,
Yes,
but
well, usually the first criteria is that you have to have a garden. So that was a first. Booker Tall didn't have a garden, but he was a very influential figure in the whole plight. So I think what it was, and now this is just to be honest with you, I think they were trying to placate him. So they gave him a voice. They gave him a voice of representing the African garden that they knew was going to take place sooner or later. There was going to be one. He was a type person, I was told, that didn't necessarily take no for an answer. And his persistence and his dedication. And so he was given active part as if he had a garden, a delegate to the Federation. And from there it was on. In fact, there was they hosted the concept, but even though they didn't have a garden, Booker Tall was very, very persuasive. And he was able to have that African American garden concept pushed forward.
so I wonder what has been the evolution of the garden since you joined in terms of like this what has been built and the plans going into the immediate future.
Well, since I've come aboard, as I said, we've had the erection of the doorway, the hall, the quarter, and the doorway of no return has been put in. We've, along with the mayor's task force, we've been wholeheartedly trying to raise funds for the garden, the next phase, which is what we consider originally was going to be phase two, but we've combined it. Will be the phase two and three will be all of one that will be going forward. And our plan is to have that, though quiet as it's kept and please don't publish it, that's supposed to break ground next month. We are meeting with the mayor to finish the final touches concerning raising the final figures. We have quite a bit in the coffers now, but we hope to break ground to complete it starting in August of this year and have it completed by Juneteenth, 2023.
Okay. And I saw the design maps. Are you guys still going with that idea, or some other going to be some other differences?
Well, just some slight modifications, but that
Mhm.
basically everything is still the same. It will still be the same,
Mm.
except the outer rings that will encompass it. I don't have that on me, the outer rings, but basically everything is the same. Mhm.
Okay. This is one question. It's kind of related to the past. So you came, so you're a lifelong Clevelander. So did you
Mhm.
see much of the gardens when it originally opened?
The gardens themselves, I'll be
Yeah.
honest with you. I was raised on 94th and Way Park, which is right above the gardens. And we were a very poor family. My father was by then totally out of the picture. My mother was raised in the house full of kids. And to get away, our thing was to go down to the park. So we filled our little crocus sack or bag full of lunches and walked down to the park because we were in walking distance. And to be honest with you, I didn't know that the rest of the garden or the rest of the world existed past the first bridge. I had no idea that all of that was there. And I know that sounds crazy, but in my then growing up, uh, learning to drive, doing the drive, I never equated that with anything. I just drove right through. But to be honest with you, when we did venture past that bridge, that was like the combat zone because we had our conflicts with the Sawinski boys. You know, the Sawinski neighborhood, the black and whites didn't necessarily get along. You know, we didn't know. So we knew if we went under that bridge, the boys from my neighborhood went through there was trouble. So that was the trouble. So we just kind of avoided. And then going on to junior high, we cut across to Harry Davis. We went down by the pond, went around. We avoided that part of the at that time Rockefeller Rockefeller Park didn't exist to us. And then when they renamed it, you know, everything took on a new look. And then after I went away to college and came back, and I drove down and saw all of these flags and all that. So, oh boy, what's this? You know, it was right there all the time, hidden in plain sight. And so I started doing some investigating and realized that those were the cultural gardens. That's a cultural gardens representing all these ethnicities. You know, I was really amazed. And so then I, again, like me, went and got involved in it because I knew about the African garden. You know, this all joined the things together. Um, I decided I was going to join the Federation. Of course, I couldn't just join the Federation. You had to represent a garden. So again, I just worked through the African garden and they acquiesced and they said, well, you can only have two delegates. So our president at the time, she said, well, I'll resign and you can be the delegate. I said, oh, well, I don't know. But of course, after some persuasion, I then joined that. And I went to the first meeting and I saw all these white folks. I'll be honest with you, I was the only black there. You know, I looked, I said, what's so I just gave them my, that I like to say, a gift of persuasion because you had to be voted in. And I had my flyers with me. I did all that, got up in front, and I told them I'd like 5 minutes of their time, you know, and they said, okay, sure. And I told them I need you to close your eyes. We're going to go on an imaginary trip. That's exactly what I told them. These folks looked at me as if I was crazy. What's wrong with this guy? I said, close your eyes, and nothing happened. Close your eyes. And we went on a trip, and I told them of a story of a little black guy, black kid, growing up in Cleveland, living a life that he knew nothing about on the other side of that bridge, going away to college, come back, and then going and being a part of. I told him I admit being a part of the mischievous group that helped to give some trouble down there. And I said, but then I came back and I looked and I saw that it looked like a mini United Nations. I said it was just something. I said, and I just want to be a part. Now open your eyes. And I said, and here's that person. You know, I need that opportunity. I want to be a part of you. And the vote was like 98 to 2, you know, in favor. You know, it was the rest is history. And I went on to get very involved in the Federation. I held almost every position other than the president there. I wanted to show them that we had it together too. You know, we knew what was happening. And I love the Federation. You know, it's a challenge, but it's our governing body. Hmm.
Okay, that's interesting. You did say a lot, actually. It did remind me of
Okay.
the Solinsky Park. There was a race ride in '63,
Oh,
actually, that I came across.
right. Okay. Okay. Now you're not
Yeah.
from Cleveland, right?
No, no, no. I just been studying the history. So I usually
Oh,
I'm shocked when I come across things like race riots and the home
yeah.
bombings that occur in
Oh
that
my.
area.
Oh
Hmm.
my. It was something. I'll tell you. It was something. We were. It was a period of time. You had to have lived it.
Hmm. Okay.
Just just as I said, the election of Carl Stokes, you had to have lived it. You had to have been here. My going to the inaugural ball and everything, it was just something.
Yeah, that's the question I wonder. So I haven't been to the cultural gardens and looked at the establishment of each garden. I noticed that early on it was strictly just European immigrant groups, and it seems like after the African American gardens and other ethnic, non-white ethnic groups kind of came along. So is it in a way did the African American cultural gardens kind of lead the way for the
Yes, we
acknowledgement of
were
non-white?
groundbreakers. We were
Mhm.
groundbreakers. And probably the most recent, no, not one of them, well, the last couple of years, the Ethiopian garden.
Mhm.
They joined. And now we had some other people of color that was very involved. And then from there, the Lebanese garden, all these others start joining. You know, it was a snowball. They started as 12. Now we have 36 gardens. The French have now gained entry. Everybody's knocking at the door to get in. We're running out of space. And to be honest with you, we sit at the apex. We have the largest garden there is. We have 4.5 acres. And the other gardens are just sometimes they're just 5 to 12 feet in diameter. That's the luck of the draw, you know. And I stand in amazement to see all that land that we have, but I think it was land that people didn't want necessarily. That's turned out to be a diamond in the rough. A diamond in the rough.
Now,
Have you
how
been
does I've been through the cultural garden. I went through 3/4 of the way. I did not finish the entire way, but I did see the African American cultural gardens and
so
various
you went up,
others.
you went to the top?
Yep. Hmm.
Oh, okay, very good.
Yeah, I
Very
took some
good.
photographs actually about a week or two ago.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was wondering, how does the acquisition of land work in the gardens?
Very good question. I don't know. I'm a bit curious, but I would like to think, I'll be honest with you, I would like to think that the mayor had a lot to do with it, meaning Mike White. He was the initiator. I mean, not the initiator, but it was through him that all this came about with our getting the seed money and all of these things. So I would like to think that he had something to do with it. Maybe I'm just thinking vicariously, but I would like to think that he had something to do with it. Mm. But
Huh.
it's strange that we got all of that land and nobody else. I think the Italians probably have almost as much. Mhm.
Mhm. No, that's interesting. I know. So I was reading when I was your wife gave me the presentation. I did read some things that when Huff and Glenville were coming predominantly black, there was like some, I guess, fear among white residents that they should take their sculptures out of the gardens. I mean, do
But
you
they
have
had
any
nowhere.
memories of that?
Well, no, I just heard vague stories of, but they had nowhere to take them. They had no idea that it would ever be. The neighborhood would turn black like that, and they truly love their gardens, and they're down there all the time. You know, just along with me. You know, I'm sun up to sundown. You know, it's my passion. I love the cultural gardens, and in particular, the African American garden.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. I would
But
do other gardens like collaborate with other gardens as
well,
well.
it wasn't until I'll be honest with you, it wasn't until the African American garden and the Hebrew garden we got together and started taking turns coming over to clean each other's gardens. And that was unheard of in the past. You know, that we would join together and come down and jointly or go up and work on theirs, and they would come down and work on ours, and then we'd have a meeting. We'd all get together down there on the ground, sit down and just tell stories. So that became a regular, you know. And when we were having our last Juneteenth celebration, the Hebrew Garden came down, shovels and all, to work on the garden to get it ready for Juneteenth, you know. And a lot of, well, five of the other gardens, in fact, flew the flag, the Juneteenth flag in their garden to show unity. You know, that had never been done before. I'm trying to get them to take the flags down now because we celebrate Juneteenth during the month of June. Now you got to take down these flags. So I'm going to just go and take them down and then just give them to them, you know, because we want to make sure that we identify a certain month. It looks good flying in their garden, but we need to have it flown on certain identified months. You know.
Now, how did the idea come about to place a historical marker at the gardens?
An historical marker.
Yeah, a
Mm,
marker to talk, commemorate the effort to get the gardens. Like, how did that idea come about?
I don't know. You mean the gardens, the holistic?
No, no, the African American culture gardens, the historical
Well, I
marker for the
guess they
gardens.
just, well, we don't have an historical marker yet.
Oh yeah, I'm talking about the idea to place one though. The
Well,
idea.
we wanted to tell our story. We wanted to tell the story. We wanted everyone that came through there to be able to see just what it was about or to learn about it. So we thought of the historical marker that we've joined on with the restoration. So I was looking at the one next door. I think the Romanian garden has one, and the idea just came to me. I said, "Boy, we need that. We need to have a marker to tell our story, to let everybody know just what how the African American gardens came about and its trials and tribulations, and that we should be part of history and the Ohio history. We're a very, very important part of the history of the city of Cleveland. During, I hate to use those negative terms at times, but it was during the race riots and the cultural upheaval where the National Guards camped there. They used that plot. That was theirs. I mean, not theirs. That was their meeting place, and there was no African garden there, so it held significance. That's where the National Guards all camped during the two incidents, the Huff riots and Sawinski and all that.
Okay, I had no idea about that.
Yeah,
So
we
this
did.
is this question that came up. So I know you say you didn't really go to the gardens as a kid, but so how did
Mhm.
most African Americans? What was their relationship to the gardens like before the, of course, the African American Cultural
There,
Gardens was
there
there?
was none. There was none, and there was, um, and I don't know exactly the year. There was an incident that happened at Sawinski Park where a woman was assaulted, and boy, it was upheaval. The picnic tables, the barbecue grills, all those things were taken out. And I don't know if it was a direct pun to us because we weren't the search. We surely weren't the only ones using those facilities, but those were taken out. And there was no more picnicking and social gathering at the parks. It was just transit, just driving through. No one ever took time to enjoy that stretch of the land. So it has, and it's been an uphill battle changing the attitudes. I know my neighbor that lives next door, who is Italian. Her daughter is very much opposed to her mother thinking of coming down to the gardens. She said, "Oh no, mom, you can't go down there. All of that robbery and assault." And I said, "Diane, that was years ago. That was years ago. Come down and enjoy the opera. The cultural exchange. There's a whole lot of things that goes on there. If you just give it a chance." And as I said, I'm there sometimes from sun up to sundown, and there are people of all different ethnic backgrounds walking, jogging, and enjoying the park. It's taken on a total different transition.
No, that's
But
interesting.
that's kept secret in the city.
So is there
Mhm.
still some fear among old time residents about the cultural gardens? Because as you said, I've been there
Well,
and it's pretty diverse.
Um, you will find every now and then. I remember on one occasion, I was working down in the garden, and this woman rode by, and I saw, and this fate have it, she had a flat tire, she made it. The car made its way over to the side of the curb, and I was down digging in the weeds, and I went over to help, and she was a Caucasian woman, and she was kind of fearful. She saw me coming. I had my spade in my hand. Oh, I dropped the spade. I said, first of all, I'm coming toward her, with that, that she might be a little apprehensive. So I said, "Oh, you having problems?" After she got enough nerve to roll down her window, to communicate with me, I said, "Do you have a spare?" She said, "Yeah, I do." So she reached in the, popped her trunk. I got the jack out and I started to fix it. She got out. And so then as she said, "Well, I have to call my husband, tell him I'll be late." She called her husband, and I heard her say that, "I'm down in the park, or Martin Luther King Park," and, and told him where. And in less than 5 minutes, that guy had jumped in that car and flew down there. He flew. I heard car flying down the road and pulled up behind, and it was him. And I was down on my knees, doing the thing. He ran up. He said, "You all right? You all right?" She said, "Oh yeah, I'm all right. This young man is helping me with my tire." And he looked. He said, "Well, thank you." I said, "Oh, no problem." So I finished the tire, and Told her, okay, take care. I had mistakenly left my phone on her car when I left, and she got halfway wherever she was going. He was from the Cleveland Clinic, and she drove back and brought me my phone back. And I thanked her. And um, the next week or so, I got a check for $100 in the mail. And what it was, thanks again for helping my wife. I looked and said, I told her who I was, and during the course of the conversation, we were talking and everything. I told her who I was, and so she must have looked it up and saw our mailing address and everything, and she sent that $100 there. And I said, "Well, look at this. Who would have ever thought?" Now, I didn't ask them to do that, but it was just a person that was in distress, and I helped her. I would have helped anyone, if they stopped on our yard, and that was it. But you asked if there's still a lot of apprehension. I have been stopped. I can't get my work done sometimes for folks stopping me wanting to talk and everything, So I just keep all the literature and stuff nearby so I can give it to them, so that they can see it and I can continue my work. That's it. So I think a lot of the apprehension is pretty much subsided.
Oh, okay. Um, but yeah, that's all the questions I had. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that I didn't bring up?
Well, I'm truly eager to have this placard installed. I can hardly wait. It is a fitting testimony to the plight of the African garden and the African people as a whole that we are finally recognized and on a very common basis. I'm proud to be a member of the African American Cultural Gardens. And whenever people unfortunately see us coming, they say, okay, oh Lord, here come those garden tutors. They're coming, they hate to see it. Well, look, Carl, we're going to join. We're going to, I mean, you have to talk the talk and walk the walk, and the garden is the best example of people of all diverse ethnic backgrounds getting together. How better to do that than through nature? And that's exactly what last week I was down in the Bohemians, and it was I went down to, what was it, Broadway, the Fleet area, because they were having adjusters where the horses and the knights were having adjusting thing. And it was sponsored by the Czech Garden. So of course I was gonna go and represent. And they looked and said, oh, here comes Carl. He comes to everything. They said, you're a man about town, aren't you? I said, well, I want to represent. I want to make sure. And of course I had my African American Cultural Gardens hat on to let them know that I was a member of the African Gardens. But I go to everything that they have. I goodwill as sort of a goodwill ambassador. You know that we don't just stick to our garden. We branch out to all the gardens. If I'm invited, I'll show up. Hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Yeah, that's all the questions I have. Then I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me on.
No, no
And
problem.
hopefully,
I'll definitely make sure I'll see the entire
you gain
gardens.
something. Okay. Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes. You've got to. But
Hmm.
make sure you come to One World Day.
When is that?
That's Sunday, August 28th.
Okay. Oh, August
We're
28th.
talking about a party of parties. We average probably 25 to 30,000 people.
Oh, wow.
And we have, but you have to get there early or park your car at VA hospital and catch a shuttle because the streets are closed down. There's only two occasions that Martin Luther King has ever closed. One for Juneteenth, we've established has never been closed before, but we closed it down on Juneteenth, and One World Day. So we're getting to that equal balance. Now, I make sure that we're involved equally, just as everyone else is. That we got it closed down. Mayor Jackson was instrumental in that, and Mayor Bibb has followed suit. In fact, he was our grand marshal our last Juneteenth, Mayor Bibb, for our car caravan. So he went through the city with us. So